Your Creative Push, episode 40.
You never know where one decision where you push past fear will lead you. Each one of those small little decisions that kind of seem like nothing can lead you to pretty amazing places.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Julie Zantopoulos. Julie is my friend and the author of Shoot Down the Wendy Bird. Before she published her first book, she was editor-in-chief, creating content for a national print and online magazine, The Indie Chicks. She now runs a community of writers and fosters creativity in others. She'll be launching Nobody's Beauty Guru, a site dedicated to her beauty addiction, in March. Now, Julie, that's a lot of things going on, but can you maybe tell me what I missed in that intro and kind of give us a peek into your personal life?
Yeah, I think that pretty much covered a whole bunch of what I'm doing. It's, been a little bit of a transition between companies and then starting my own kind of brands, but it doesn't leave a whole ton of time for downtime. But the social life of writers can be a pretty scary and non-existent thing sometimes. It's either really sketchy or really non-existent. But I guess if I'm not writing, which doesn't happen too often, I'm probably watching like horrible sci-fi movies. I'm addicted to them, cannot get enough, or just out with family and friends. So honestly, there's not a whole lot of time where I'm not working on some kind of project or another.
Well, that's good that you're able to fill your time that way. What's your favorite crappy science fiction movie?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I was not prepared for that question. I'm I definitely fell prey to like the whole Sharknado craze, but I was like addicted to it way before that. So I don't think you can go wrong with like, what was it? There was like Sharktopus. Is pretty phenomenal. There's the Piranaconda.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's pretty amazing. So any of those, I draw the line whenever, oh God, who is it? Like Debbie Gibson and Tiffany.
Oh yeah.
Oh God. If they were in it, and then Hulk's daughter's in them. I can't.
Yeah.
I love them all.
And they found that the guy from, what was his name? From 90210. I forget what his name is. He's like the lead of Sharknado.
Sharknado, yeah. Ian, isn't it? Ian.
Oh yeah, Ian Gosling.
Oh my gosh.
Something, or whatever.
And Tara Reid. Honestly, I think my addiction to them comes from the fact that I usually like watch those in the background while I'm working. That if those can be made into movies, there's like no way my writing's going to fail. Right. So, I mean.
Yeah, I think it's good. Actually, like, it's interesting that we're going down this path. But yeah, it is kind of inspiring to like look at just crappy stuff that like makes it.
Oh, yeah.
Because it does give you that fire to be like, wow, I could do this.
Yeah.
Patton Oswalt has an awesome joke that I'll link. I forget what the name of the movie was, but it was called The Mattress That Eats People. And it was about a bed that like ate people. And he was just like, if this kind of crap can get out there, then
yeah, of
course my stuff can too.
Yeah, there's no way to fail when that's the standard in some people's eyes. Like, I've got this.
Yeah, for sure. Can you take us back to your first, or maybe one of your first creative moments, and tell us that story?
I think that for me, my first creative moment in terms of being a writer, which I've always wanted to be, happened, and this sounds so incredibly posh, and I swear to God I'm not, but I was in Greece, and it was my first trip to Greece. I went with my grandmother, and I was 11, and right before my trip, I had been given a journal, and it was my first journal. I wasn't like a diary kind of a girl when I was younger, but my great aunt had given me a journal right before my trip just so I could document everything that I saw. And somewhere between, I think I was in like Mykonos or Crete. I was on one of the islands, and for some reason, I kind of transitioned between like documenting the things that I was seeing, different monuments and ruins. And I was kind of sitting by the water, and I was on this cement bench, and there was tourists all around me, and I had my little journal out, and I started writing a story about this little old man who was literally bringing in fish. He was like down by the water. He was bringing fish in off of his boat. And I started, instead of just like documenting, like, hey, I saw this old guy with a fishing boat. He like looked really gnarled and old, and just kind of could tell he'd been by the water all the time. I started writing a story about him. And and I think the rest of that journal, the rest of the trip was just me writing, creatively instead of documenting things. And that's the first time that I kind of wrote a story as opposed to just, these like emotional ramblings. But
Right.
I remember loving it and being really, really addicted to it. And I mean, it's kind of an inspiring place for creativity and beauty. You can't really go wrong with that being your first. But yeah, it was like the first time that I felt moved to not just document what I was seeing, but to kind of expand on it and think creatively on it. And I never looked back. I fell in love with it.
Yeah, I love that story. And it's funny too. I think there's like a switch, at least for writers. I think it's the same for a lot of creative people, but especially for writers, there's like a switch almost that kind of goes off where you're like, oh, I can make things up.
Yeah.
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 I had that too. I used to only write about, myself or things that happen in my life. All of a sudden I was like, oh, it's okay to like write about outer space or things that I have no idea about. So what do you think it is that kind of switches that in people?
I honestly, I think I was like a pretty nerdy goody two shoes when I was younger. And I think a part of me always felt like it might be lying. I was always very imaginative and very creative, and you know, I saw fairies and little fireflies. There's definitely a
Right,
story
right.
in my book that kind of harkens to that too. That was totally me as a child. So I always had this really magical quality about me, but something about when I sat down to write felt like it was very school related, and it should be fact based and structured. And yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's that, I don't want to lie, or I don't, or you just don't trust yourself maybe, or you kind of have to have that moment where you're finally inspired to take that jump.
Mm.
um, I'm not sure. I never really thought on that, but there definitely was that hardcore switch for me between just writing to write or writing to document and then writing for pleasure. I'm so glad I had it, but I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Now, what kind of writing can we expect to see in Shoot Down the Wendy Bird?
Yeah, so Shoot Down the Wendy Bird is a collection of different short stories, and there's a few poems in there just to break things up. But it was a collection of my different short stories, short fiction, flash fiction. They're very short, kind of easy to digest stories. And they were an accumulation of stories that I used as a way to have a creative outlet when I was writing structured articles for online content for years and years. And I found myself really missing having that creative outlet. So they range over a ton of different topics. And I've had a lot of people say that it was a super emotional journey. Some people cried, some people had to like put it down and call their family in
Aw.
the middle of it, which is like super touching. A girl, the sweetest girl that was an Indie Chick supporter, messaged me this morning on Facebook and said, "Hey, I gave you a shout out on my blog and I went over to check it out." She compared me to Sylvia Plath, which made me want to go and run and put my head in an oven. Like, I can't
Aw.
believe that she did that.
That's so nice, yeah.
Um, it is emotional, and my father was really concerned that everybody was going to think that I came from a horrible family, but I really do treat my writing in a lot of the times as an outlet, a coping mechanism. When I'm having hard times or I'm trying to work through different things. So a lot of the stories can lean towards the dark, but you have to kind of see the light in them. And I think there is light in all of them, but they definitely kind of take you on an emotional journey, which I actually kind of really love. So,
Yeah, and I know that from, back in our blogging days, that you're very honest and, very forthcoming about your life and just very honest in that way. What advice would you give to people who are kind of scared to put themselves out there like that?
oh my gosh, that for me was the hardest part of the writing process, especially from day one as a blogger. And I drug my heels. I did not want to actually hit publish on my first article, but it's so hard to just say do it. Just trust in yourself and trust in your voice and trust in your writing to just do it. But honestly, the hardest part is hitting publish, and that doesn't change over time. I had the same anxiety hitting publish on my book as I did hitting publish on my first post, and
Mm.
it's not necessarily something that you just get over, but it's something that you get used to. And I think you need to trust in yourself and your own unique view on things, that there's somebody out there that wants to read it and probably needs to read it, and that the world kind of deserves to hear your voice, and it should be heard. You were given it for a reason. So it's scary, and I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, it's not scary. It shouldn't be scary. because if you write, especially the way that I write, it is raw and it is vulnerable, and you're always kind of waiting to see how it's received. But I can tell you that I don't think there's any greater joy than when you do finally let go and let your work be appreciated by other people. And it gives your writing a new meaning and a new life. And it's scary to let go of that control as a writer, but it's really not meant just for you, unless you write as like a journaling or something like that. But if you're of a mind to actually share your writing, it deserves to be shared. And the new life that other people give it in the way that they see it is really beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful, and it also can really help you out too, to be able to like connect with people that way. Like to
Yeah,
say, "Oh, I am not the only one that thinks this way or that feels this way or that has had this happen to me," or whatever it may be. It's nice to have that communication, that dialogue with other people. It's pretty crazy,
absolutely.
actually.
Absolutely. And it helps you grow so much as a writer. And I'm sure, I mean, you've been around since day one of my original personal blog,
Right.
but you grow so much more when you allow yourself to share and get feedback.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, especially for writers, because it can be very solitary and it can feel very much like being inside of a bubble. But when you share with other people and realize how not alone you are, one of two things happens. Either you kind of get off on that I'm unique in my pain,
Hmm.
or I'm unique in my situations kind of a thing. And then you kind of have this eye-opening experience. Or you just realize that there's this whole community of people, of writers, or whoever's going through what you're going through, and you can kind of go on that journey together, and then it feels really good to not be alone.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It feels good to have that community for sure.
yeah.
What advice would you give to somebody? Because like we just mentioned, we kind of started out in the blogging and putting it out that way. What would you suggest to somebody who is doing that currently, that wants to kind of create a book like you did?
I would say that, and honestly, because my book was completely by accident, you have a wealth, especially as a blogger or a writer, you have a wealth of content on your website, and you know what gets the most shares, the most comments, you know what connects with people the most. And when you can hone in on that and then either tailor new writing to that or pull from what you already have, there's a very powerful thing in already having a readership and already having people that understand your voice in terms of confidence, in terms of marketing and a target audience. And there's a lot that goes into the process. I would say really think hard about the direction you would like your book to go in. You probably know your writing niche the best, you know your blog and your target the best, and then look through your content, see what you have that fits, that you can tie together in some kind of linear way or that makes sense as a unit, and then fill in holes where you see holes where there isn't content, write new content, and then have trusted people at the end of the process. Like, don't bring people in too early, but at the end of the process, when you're really happy with what you have, bring in a couple of like trusted pre-readers, bring in the most knowledgeable people you know about editing, and really hone in on what makes the book cohesive. Coming from a blogging standpoint, you want to make sure that each story or each post or each article is kind of linked to each other in a way that the readers can start and end somewhere,
Hmm.
that there's a natural flow there. The publishing process it's fun. It's really, really fun. It's stressful, but it's fun. And I encourage everybody to do it. And if you have that resource to pull from already, you're ahead of where most people start. So I see no reason why every blogger at some point can't put out a book.
Yeah, that was a sneaky question that I threw in because it was a question for me. So good advice, thanks.
Yeah.
No, well, so with everything that you have going on,
Mhm.
do you ever have days or weeks or whatever time period where like you have things that are kind of holding you back aside from, as you mentioned before, the fear of like hitting the publish button, which I definitely have too. But do you have any other things that kind of hold you back from doing the work?
Yeah, absolutely. I have learned to be very patient with myself. There are times where it isn't fear. It's just you've got to kind of learn as a creative person that yes, writing or painting or whatever your craft might be should be if that is your true passion and what you want to pursue, it should be a part of your daily life. And it should be something that you take time to do daily. But there are times where you are not in the mind space to be able to actually sit down and produce or create something that you know at the end of the day you're going to be proud of. And on days like that, I might journal or write something just for my own personal self that never sees the light of day, just so that I stay in the habit of writing. But I try not to force myself to write when I know the headspace that I'm in is not conducive to writing. I've also had to learn, especially when running the magazine and then moving forward and creating my own different websites, that there is nothing to write about if you do not give yourself time to go out and live an active life. That what makes your voice amazing and your stories and your posts amazing is that you are pulling from personal, emotional experiences. And in order to have those, you need to actually have a life that you are passionate and engaged in. And sometimes having a passionate, engaged life means you're away from your computer or you're away from your art for a while and you're just out experiencing life. And that makes you a better creative person at the end of the day when you do sit down to practice your art form. So I think that there's something great about being structured and making sure it's a part of your everyday, but being very forgiving also about either not being in the right headspace or just needing to go out and live life so that there's something to come back and be creatively inspired by. So that for me, finding that balance definitely helped to not feel forced to have to sit down, but to actually really want to passionately sit down and write.
I think that's a great answer. And it's, yeah, once you kind of get in the habit of doing something every day, as you said, you start to understand yourself a little bit better when you kind of need those breaks, and when you just know that you're just going to be sitting in front of a computer being frustrated for 2 hours because you can't put any words down that are, meaningful. Sometimes it's okay to kind of push through that, and eventually you get to that creative space. But yeah, definitely going outside and just doing something new is extremely important. As you said, you can kind of cultivate a more creative life or get back to your creative life.
Yeah, I agree.
Can you share with us the story of your worst moment creatively?
I think my worst creative moments, and there's, been no shortage of them for sure, have been when I doubted myself. My worst creative moments didn't ever come from negative comments or people criticizing short stories or articles that I published. It never came from opposition in the discussions in the comments or anything like that. And it never even came from family or friends who didn't understand my time commitment to writing. My worst moments where I doubted myself, my writing, it's always been internally based. The times I felt crappiest about my own creative process have been when I let myself doubt my creative process or my talents. And I think as a writer and as a creator, there's such a tendency to live in your own head. And I think that also stems from my background as a psychology major. I'm always very introspective and trying to figure out the source of my motivations and make sure that I'm kind of checking in with myself. And not every check-in is a positive one. And sometimes I live too much in those negative headspaces. And when I doubted myself or my direction, that's always been the most difficult for me because it's a hard cycle to break.
How do you break it?
That's a great question. I think that it comes with time. It comes with experience, and I think that pushing through. I don't think that you ever stop doubting yourself. I mean, I still doubt myself.
Yeah.
I doubted myself when I started the book tour. I doubted myself the whole time. And I think that the only way to break that is to push through. So you do it even though you're afraid of it. And when you do it even though you're afraid of it, you gain such strength.
Yeah.
And when you do it even though you're afraid of it, then you realize you can do it and you can do it well, and that there's, the margin for success is so much greater than the margin for error and failure. Every time you do that and you just push through and do it anyway, your confidence grows. And I personally, at this point in my journey, after doing so many things that went outside my comfort zone, get such a high, like a really kind of ridiculous high off of doing things that scare me or doing things that I never thought I could. Now I'm like always constantly looking for like that next thing that scares the absolute shit out of me. But there's a switch that flips and you stop seeing those obstacles as insurmountable and you're scared. But I think that fear is a great motivator. And eventually, you start to learn that being afraid of something doesn't mean that it's not something you should do. Sometimes that is still the right thing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I think I certainly can relate to that. And I think writers especially can relate to that idea of, being in your own head and trying to figure out if you're good or not, or if your work sucks. Because like, especially when you get in that negative spot, like anybody around you, anybody that reads your stuff can tell you you're good, but you're like, no, you're just lying to me. It's a really tough thing to get through. So I think that's good advice to just kind of push through it. And then you kind of look around a month later or whatever, when you're into the thing and you're like, oh, I'm there. I'm in the middle of doing this thing, whatever it is. Exactly.
Yeah. For me, like all my pre-screen readers were people that like I cared about, that I trusted with my book. So of course, some of them came back with really great constructive criticism, but most of them came back saying like, no, it's really great. And I'm like, well, God damn it, they have to say that, right? Like they're not going to tell me it's not. So I held my breath. Like I did not sleep until like the first non-biased review started coming in. And then I was like, oh God, thank God they were right. It actually is good. Awesome.
That's awesome. Can you take us to your best moment or maybe your most triumphant creative moment? Tell us that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one of the most pivotal and life-changing decisions that I made was being really, really afraid to kind of change over from individual blogging, which I was very comfortable with, and I kind of knew my niche and my target, and I had this circle of bloggers that I was very comfortable writing to and with, and then taking the leap to go to the Indie Chicks, which started off small, but ended up being this national magazine, and not just writing for them, because writing for them was something that I was comfortable doing, but then when I was asked to come on board and be a business owner, as a creator, you don't think about things sometimes from a monetary standpoint. And for me, that was a really, really hard switch for me. So I think my most triumphant moment was taking that jump from a writer to somebody who realized they could make a living off of doing what they loved. So for me, one of the most empowering moments was when I realized that it was not a hobby. It was not just something that I was mediocre at, but that it was something that I actually was. And claiming myself as a writer was probably one of the most profound and amazing experiences, to actually tell people when I met them, I'm Julie Zantopoulos, I'm a writer, and then holding my book in my hands for the first time and realizing that now I got to say I'm a writer and author, and being able to say that I was an author and to actually sell my writing and make money on my writing and be an, by no means quote unquote successful or self-sustained writer, but to know that my talent had grown past what I had ever thought that it could throughout the course of all these small decisions that terrified me, that led me to a place of such empowerment as a creator. Because sometimes we really look at ourselves as being, victims of our art, but owning that art and owning that hard work and saying like, no, like I can be successful at this. That was kind of phenomenal to me, because at no point did I think that my little personal blog was going to end to me, writing a book, publishing a book, making any kind of money off my writing. Like I never considered making money off of doing what I love. Not that I wouldn't keep doing it for free forever, but it's really nice to not have to.
Absolutely. And that's the dream, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that just inspires a lot of people. What you just said is, the fact that you didn't think that it was going to lead to that. And I think it kind of is important for people that aren't creating, that want to create, to, like you said, do it for the love of it, to just kind of start doing it and not worry about that, like the peak of the mountain or, the long distance that they have to go in order to get to the point that you're at. just kind of take those steps, as you said, and keep making those small decisions. And I think eventually it will lead to something that you can't quite imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Each little step takes you, in directions that you never anticipated. And each one still does. I continue on the journey, and you never know where one decision where you push past fear will lead you. So each one of those small little decisions that kind of seem like nothing can lead you to pretty amazing places. So
it take you to amazing places indeed. Oh man, I love that. But we are running out of time, so it's time for our final push, Julie. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone, grab the shoulder of somebody you've already inspired today, somebody who maybe hasn't started taking those little steps we were talking about today, and give them a push into taking that first step.
Yeah. So my advice is definitely going to be, for writers, but my best piece of advice for you and what changed me the most is to own yourself as a writer. So to not treat your writing or your craft like a hobby, to treat it like it's a part of who you are and what you do, and to call yourself out loud a writer. Introduce yourself to people as a writer. When people ask you what you do, tell them that you're a writer. I don't care if you say, I'm a writer, but my day job is I do this. I'm a nanny during the day. Tell them that you are a writer, because there's power in words and there's power in owning your craft, and to push yourself to join a community of writers and engage and participate in things that scare you. So join up writing prompts, join up writing challenges, submit your works to different places for competitions, share it even if it scares you, and just keep pushing past that fear.
God, I love that advice of just calling yourself a writer. Like that's so powerful, because it holds yourself accountable too. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't quite feel it that way, like you eventually will trick yourself into becoming a writer or an artist or whatever it is that you want to be. And it also opens up the discussion too, where if you're putting that out there, the people that you're talking to might be very interested in your writing, in your art, or they have some kind of resource that could help you as well. So I think it's a very powerful idea of just putting it out there like that. Great advice.
Thank you.
Of course. Julie, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of course. And you can and should check out her book, Shoot Down the Wendy Bird, on Amazon. Unless you want a signed copy, then head over to her website at juliezantopoulos.com, and I will spell that for you. Zantopoulos. But if it's easier, you can just head to the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Julie. And you can also find nobodiesbeautyguru.com. Can you tell us about that a little bit real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a self-proclaimed makeup junkie. I love it. But I know I am not a makeup artist. I enjoy it. I enjoy playing with it. And I created a website, Nobody's Beauty Guru, which will be launching on March 1st, Tuesday, with a friend of mine. And we are just two average women who love makeup that want to speak to other women who love makeup, but from a non-professional standpoint. So you'll get reviews and tips and tricks that actually make sense to you, as opposed to something coming from somebody who spent years and years studying it. So we're just kind of excited to engulf ourselves in a community of women who have the same kind of hobbies and passions that we do. Very
cool. And I just love that you are totally willing to just branch out and do kind of whatever interests you, even when you have other stuff going on. I really respect that about you.
Thank you very much.
Julie, it was great catching up with you today, and it's been a while, so let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely. I am always around and more than excited to talk to other creative people. And thank you for doing what you do and starting a podcast that inspires other people. I think it's fantastic, and I really look forward to promoting it and letting people know about it.
Cool. Thank you, Julie.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again, and have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Wow, that was such a great conversation with Julie, and so nice to catch up. And, before I get into anything else, I just have to apologize to that Sharknado guy. I called you Ian Gosling, and that person doesn't even exist. It's not even Ian Ziering, it's Ian Ziering. So I couldn't even get the first name right. So, Ian, I am, so sorry if I offended you by getting your name wrong. Keep up the good work with your illustrious acting career, and just keep making good decisions on what you're in, like Sharknado, wonderful job. But such a great conversation, as I said, with Julie. It was really, really nice to be able to catch up with her. And it's just really great to see her, keeping up with it and really pushing forward with it and publishing this first book. I just ordered my signed copy of it today. I'm just obsessed with this idea of, call yourself a writer, call yourself an artist, call yourself a photographer, whatever it is, as long as you do it once and as long as you're kind of actively, pursuing this interest of yours, then you can call yourself that because you're doing it. Like, you have that right. And I think there's a lot of power in calling yourself the thing that you want to do, as opposed to the job that you hate. Yeah, say I'm a writer, but my day job is blank. Like I said, not only do you have the right to do this, and not only does it feel better to do this, but it also opens up the door for the universe, or call it what you will, but just other people to kind of latch onto that and to try to help you out, or perhaps you can help them out and help to push them. I think that you have the responsibility as a creative person to do that as well. If you see somebody who is kind of vaguely interested in doing something, if they're jealous of what you're doing, it's kind of your responsibility to push them to do it. So own your craft and define yourself by your craft. Great, great words of wisdom. On tomorrow's show, we have Anya Khan.
You don't need to make this for anybody but yourself. If you're sitting out there trying to adapt to your audience, do things that people like so it will sell, or it's part of a genre, or it's this, screw that. I mean, you're just ruining your creativity. You're ruining the essence of your soul. Get in there, grab a canvas, grab a pencil, get on the computer, mess around, try different things, play around. Always try to just, it might look like crap. Some of my first stuff is terrible. Some of the stuff I do now is terrible because I'm trying new things. And you'll never find, what you're really supposed to be doing if you're always so worried about what people are thinking.
Anya is a very talented artist, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. She has a great story about her creative journey, and she has a lot to offer to potential creative people. So that is for you tomorrow if you need the push, but hopefully today you were pushed enough to go and get some work done. So do exactly that. Own your craft and go and get it done. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.